Chapter 31 Snow Water. Lin Wang maintained his usual composure and asked, "How much do you need?" After a moment's hesitation, Hao Wang replied, "At least 200 talisman slips." "That much? What do you need them for?" Lin Wang was taken aback. Although he could afford it, he had accumulated nearly 500 talisman slips in bribes over the past few months. It was still a considerable amount. Hao Wang sighed, his face filled with worry. "Brother Taiju, the inner disciples competition is only 2 months away. While I'm qualified to participate, I don't have what it takes to rank. But I can't accept that. That Wang Zhuo has already reached the peak of the first level of Qi condensation, and I heard he's attempting to break through to the second level. How did he advance so quickly?" Lin Wang hadn't seen Wang Zhuo a while and was quite surprised, thinking to himself that natural talent truly made a difference. Anger flashed across Hao Wang's face. "It's all because he has a good master. His master went to great lengths to obtain a transformation pill for my master. That's an extremely precious medicine. In our sect, of course, his progress accelerated after taking it." Lin Wang nodded, but asked puzzled, "What does this have to do with borrowing talisman slips?" "Everything. Since you don't interact much with others, you wouldn't know. In the month before the sect competition, inner disciples hold a secret trading fair. Everyone brings their treasures to exchange, making final preparations for the competition. I've heard from the seniors who participated before that you can find everything there: flying swords, magical artifacts, medicinal pills, you name it." Hao Wang's eyes gleamed as he spoke quietly. Lin Wang's heart skipped a beat at this information. While he had little interest in flying swords or magical artifacts, the prospect of obtaining advanced Qi condensation manuals captivated him. After pondering for a moment, he asked, "With so few inner disciples, can they really trade honestly with each other?" Hao Wang let out a cynical laugh. "Brother Taiju, you've hit the nail on the head. That's why there's another rule, or rather, a requirement for participation. Everyone must have a shape-shifting pill. Once consumed, only someone at the Foundation establishment realm could detect it." Lin Wang's eyes flickered. "So you're borrowing talisman slips to buy this pill?" Hao Wang nodded in surprise. "Brother Taiju, you're sharp. Yes, that's exactly it. My master controls the supply of these pills, and sells them privately during this season every year. The price is fixed at 200 talisman slips per pill." Lin Wang contemplated briefly before saying with a smile, "This trading fair sounds interesting. I'd like to see it for myself." "Of course, anyone with the pill can attend," Hao Wang quickly replied. "I'm hoping to get a transformation pill this time. I heard an inner disciple is selling one." Lin Wang flipped his right hand and retrieved 400 talisman slips from his storage pouch, bundled in groups of 100. Hao Wang's eyes lit up as he accepted them and placed them in his storage pouch. Excitedly, he said, "Brother Taiju, we have about half a month. I'll come find you when it's time and we'll go together." Lin Wang nodded, chatted with him a while longer, and then Hao Wang took his leave. After he left, Lin Wang fell into deep thought. He considered this trading fair extremely important. If there were advanced Qi condensation manuals available, he was determined to obtain them. However, he currently had no valuable items, and all his talisman slips had been spent on pills. After lengthy consideration, he decided to prepare some spirit spring water, believing it would attract interested buyers. With the pill's protection, no one would discover his identity. Having made his decision, Lin Wang set the matter aside. Since it wasn't time for his dream space interval yet, he returned to the miscellaneous duties area and continued practicing his gravity technique on the large rock. He had practiced this gravity countless times in the dream space recently, and his proficiency had greatly improved. When controlling gourds, he could succeed 10 out of 10 times, and in daily life he could effortlessly draw small objects to his hand from a distance. However, his success rate dropped with larger objects, though as his internal spiritual energy grew, especially after entering the second layer of tea condensation, the power of his gravity technique began to gradually manifest. After practicing for several hours, darkness fell outside, and the snow continued to fall. Instead of entering the dream space immediately, Lin Wang stood at the doorway, watching the snowflakes and lost in thought. During the past month of second layer cultivation, Lin Wang had noticed an issue. The effectiveness of the spirit spring water had slightly decreased. Though the reduction was minimal and could be compensated for with increased quantity, it still worried him. He feared that as his key condensation level rose, there would eventually come a day when the spirit spring water would lose its effect entirely. For the mysterious pearl's infusion, dew is best followed by spring water, he murmured to himself. But dew collection is too slow and insufficient for use, especially in winter. Only spring water is practical and readily available. If spring water does become ineffective one day, I must prepare an alternative in advance. His eyes flickered as he gazed at the thick snow covering the ground. With subtle hand movements, he employed the gravity technique, causing large chunks of snow to float from the ground and snake into a large vat like a snowdrift. Soon the vat was nearly half full. Lin Wang ceased the gravity technique and approached the vat. After about 10 attempts at forming hand seals, he finally produced a fireball the size of an infant's fist. The fireball's high temperature quickly melted the snow. After the snow had completely melted, he wiped the sweat from his forehead, as using 2 different techniques in succession had been quite taxing. There wasn't much snowmelt in the vat, but Lin Wang immediately took out the mysterious pearl and dropped it in. After half an incense stick's time, he retrieved the pearl. By now he had thoroughly researched the mysterious pearl. For instance, he knew that when soaking in spring water, half an incense stick's time was the limit. He had tried longer soaking periods, but discovered that regardless of duration, the effect remained the same once it exceeded half an incense stick's time. He ladled out some water and took a sip, closing his eyes to carefully observe the concentration of spiritual energy within his body. After a moment he opened his eyes and muttered to himself, "The effect is much better than spring water, though still not as good as dew. It's usable." He immediately began taking out gourd after gourd from his storage pouch. These were all gourds he had collected from the mountain over the past half-year. He worked through the entire night until the yard was cleared of snow, managing to fill just under half of his gourds with spiritually enhanced snowmelt. Chapter 32: The Trade. In the following days, aside from his time in the dream space, Lin Wang busied himself storing snow water. If not for concerns about spiritual energy leakage, he would have used large vats as containers. Instead, he had to use gourds, though fortunately he had plenty. Within a few days, he had accumulated several hundred small gourds. By his calculations, this supply of snow water should last him a long time in the dream space. After storing all the gourds, Lin Wang resumed his cultivation. Although the spring water's effectiveness had somewhat decreased, it hadn't completely lost its potency and remained usable. 10 days passed quickly. During this period, Lin Wang consumed far more spring water than ever before. Fortunately, the water immediately dissolved into spiritual energy upon consumption, otherwise his stomach could never have contained such volume. The second layer of key condensation required several times more spiritual energy than the first layer. By now, Lin Wang had effectively spent over 9 months cultivating in the dream space. In the past, 9 months of constant cultivation at the first layer with abundant spiritual energy supply would have yielded notable results. But now, despite feeling his internal spiritual energy had increased significantly, he remained unsatisfied with the progress. On the appointed day with Hao Wang, Lin Wang skipped his dream space cultivation and waited quietly. At midnight, as heavy snow fell outside, Hao Wang's presence appeared within his spiritual sense. Soon after, Hao Wang pushed open the door but didn't enter, saying urgently, "My master was delayed with pill refinement. I barely managed to get away. Quick, let's go, the trading fair's about to begin." He hurried away, with Lin Wang following closely behind. The two trudged through the snow within the sect grounds for a short while before leaving the sect and following a mountain path deeper into the wilderness. The path was extremely slippery, forcing Hao Wang to proceed cautiously. Shivering, he grumbled under his breath, "This cursed weather! With snow this heavy, if your young master falls into a ravine, I'll seek justice even as a ghost." Lin Wang, with his now agile body, felt differently. He actually appreciated this weather, thinking he could collect more snow water after the trading fair. After walking for a while, Hao Wang stopped and turned around, mysteriously handing Lin Wang a green pill. He whispered, "We're almost there." I scouted this place a few days ago, just a few more turns. Let's take the pills first so no one can identify us." He then took an identical pill himself. Thick black mist immediately spread from his body, completely enveloping him. A hoarse voice emerged from within. "Well, can you tell who I am?" Lin Wang probed with his spiritual sense and found it was like trying to penetrate thick mud impossible to penetrate. Finally, feeling reassured, he smiled. "This pill is truly miraculous." He took his pill, and the same transformation occurred. The two black mist-shrouded figures quickly proceeded deeper along the path. After several turns, they reached a clearing at the path's end. The clearing was large, packed with dozens of black figures identical to Lin Wang and Hao Wang, all standing in silence. The two found an empty spot and stood still. Soon after, seeing no more arrivals, one person stepped forward, coughed dryly, and spoke in a hoarse voice. "Time's up. I'll host again, with the usual rules. I'll go first." He produced a small silver sword and continued. "Its power is decent. I want spiritual enemies, 500 of them." Partners among the crowd discussed among themselves. After a while, someone stepped forward and silently produced 500 talisman slips, completing the trade. Then another person spoke up. "I have a lower grade jade talisman that can produce 3 earth-splitting spells. I'll trade it for 10 spirit-stealing pills." He briefly displayed a crystalline jade pendant before putting it away. "I'll trade," someone near Lin Wang immediately said, stepping forward. Just then another voice quickly interjected. "I'll offer 12 spirit-stealing pills for the jade talisman." The first bidder hesitated briefly, shot the other person a fierce glare, and fell silent, believing 10 pills had already been the upper limit. People continued stepping forward one after another to present their items. The atmosphere grew livelier, with occasional bidding wars breaking out over particularly desirable items, always going to the highest bidder. "I have a technique that can be cultivated at the second layer of key condensation. It can't temporarily conceal one's cultivation level, only those at foundation establishment can detect it. I know it's not very useful, so I'll trade it for 10. "No, just 5 spirit-stealing pills," one person said hesitantly. The crowd sneered. Such a technique was completely useless in her disciples' status depended entirely on their cultivation level, with higher levels bringing better treatment. Who would deliberately hide their cultivation? If the technique could conceal it permanently, that would be different, but it was only temporary. Moreover, 5 spirit-stealing pills seemed expensive. Seeing no interest, the speaker sighed and was about to withdraw when Lin Wang suddenly stepped forward and said in a deep voice, "5 spirit-stealing pills, I'll take it." The person was startled, then delighted, and quickly completed the trade. Holding the jade slip containing the technique record, Lin Wang was momentarily surprised. He had never seen such an item before. His spiritual sense swept over it, and the technique's incantations immediately flooded his mind. While this item held little value for others, it was extremely useful to him. Though the concealment was temporary, it would suffice. Just then another person stepped forward and spoke with a haughty tone despite the hoarseness. "1 transformation pill. Make your offers." Hao Wang immediately grew excited and quickly said, "20 spirit-stealing pill. 1,000 talisman slips plus a flying sword. 2,000 talisman slips. 30 spirit-stealing pills plus 500 talisman slips. 1 lower grade jade talisman, 1 flying sword, 10 spirit-stealing pills, and 500 talisman slips." Everyone called out bids enthusiastically, clearly viewing the transformation pill as extremely valuable. Lin Wang had learned about these pills from Hao Wang. They were incredibly precious medicines. After consumption, the effects would remain in the body for 2 months. During cultivator's spiritual energy absorption rate would increase several-fold. It was the preferred choice for many inner disciples attempting to break through to their next key condensation layer. These pills were extremely precious even within the sect. Under normal circumstances, disciples only had 2 opportunities to obtain them in their lifetime: 1 pill upon advancing to black robes, and 2 pills upon reaching purple robes. Chapter 33: The Manual. Lin Wang had no interest in the transformation pill. Seeing the price climb so high, he felt sorry for Hao Wang. It seemed the pill would be beyond his reach. Just as he was thinking this, Hao Wang suddenly shouted beside him, 230 spirit-stealing pills, that's my limit. Any more than that, and I know." The crowd fell silent. 230 spirit-stealing pills was an extremely high price that few would exceed, but the transformation pill was so rare that many remained reluctant to give up. At that moment, the person with the transformation pill suddenly laughed and arrogantly declared, "230 pills for young master's transformation pill? Keep dreaming. I won't trade for anything less than 2,000 spirit-stealing pills." Lin Wang found the speaker's tone familiar. After careful observation, he suspected it was Wang Zhuo, though he couldn't be certain since the person's form, voice, and appearance were all concealed within the thick black mist. How Wang hung his head in silence. Everyone at the trading fair was stunned by such arrogant words, and no one made further offers. The fair's host coughed dryly and said, "Well, since no one's trading for the transformation pill, let's move on and continue with other trades." Soon after, others came forward with their items. When Lin Wang's turn came, he produced a small bottle and said, "A mysterious liquid where 1 drop equals 1 spirit-stealing pill in potency. There are roughly 100 drops here. I'll only trade it for cultivation manuals for key condensation 3rd layer and above." As he finished speaking, he opened the bottle's cap, releasing a wave of ethereal spiritual energy. Many people were tempted. Spirit-stealing pills were finished products that could only be consumed orally, despite their spiritual energy content. This liquid, however, had multiple uses. It could produce remarkable effects in pill refinement, and it even enhanced the spiritual nature of magical treasures and flying swords. Someone immediately called out, "I'll trade you the 4th layer manual." Lin Wang raised an eyebrow, replied, "Only the 4th layer. I'll trade you the manuals for layers 4, 5, and 6. "How about that?" another person shouted from the side. Lin Wang pondered briefly before shaking his head. "I want the manuals for all layers 3 through 15. Brother, you're asking the impossible. Even second senior brother Zhang Kuang, the strongest in last year's competition, only reached the 6th layer of key condensation. He only has the manuals for layers 7, 8, and 9. Apart from some senior uncles, no one has the manuals for layers 10 through 15, someone said with a light laugh. Lin Wang was taken aback and hesitated. Just then a voice came from nearby. "If you have 200 drops of that liquid, I can give you all the manuals from 4 to 9. Everyone turned to look. A purple-robed man in his late 20s approached from the path. His demeanor was cold, and he hadn't used the shape-shifting pill. As he arrived, his sweeping gaze made everyone tremble with fear, and they respectfully called out, "Greetings, second senior brother." The purple-robed man ignored them and fixed his gaze on Lin Wang, asking, "Do you have 200 drops?" Lin Wang's heart tightened, his pupils contracting sharply. The aura emanating from his person gave him an extremely dangerous feeling, far surpassing anyone he'd met in the Heng Yue Sect. Neither his master's son nor senior brother Zhang could compare. "I obtained this liquid by chance. Besides these 100 drops, I have a few dozen more that I plan to use myself." "I don't have that many," Lin Wang replied respectfully. The purple-robed man contemplated briefly before flicking his right hand, tossing out a jade slip. "Very well. Give me all your remaining liquid, and these manuals are yours." Lin Wang caught it and confirmed its contents with his spiritual sense. Satisfied, he immediately took out another small bottle from his storage pouch and placed both bottles gently on the ground, maintaining his distance from the man. The purple-robed man glanced at Lin Wang, then wordlessly used his power to draw both bottles into his embrace. After a brief examination with his spiritual sense, he nodded and said, "If you obtain more of this liquid, you can find me in the back mountain. Whether it's transformation pills, flying swords, jade talismans, or even manuals for key condensation 10th layer and beyond, I can get them all." With that he swept his sleeve and departed. Lin Wang's eyes narrowed, flashing with cold light. The man's parting words were exceptionally malicious. Others might not immediately grasp the hidden meaning, but Lin Wang had always been clever, understanding many things clearly even if he didn't speak of them. The underlying message was that anyone with this liquid could trade with him for any item, effectively pushing Lin Wang to a dangerous edge. Though he couldn't see the others' gazes through their disguises, he felt like needles were pricking his back, clearly indicating some were secretly watching him. However, Lin Wang had anticipated potential problems when he decided to bring out the spirit spring water, so he remained calm, casually observing his surroundings. The trading continued for a while longer before concluding. Some left satisfied with their trades, others disappointed, each with their own thought. Lin Wang didn't leave with Hao Wan. Instead, he secretly applied dozens of talisman slips to his legs and shot away like a sword, disappearing in an instant. Hao Wang, being quick-witted, immediately understood and did the same, applying talismans and fleeing rapidly. The other disciples who had revealed valuable items at the trading fair did likewise, hastily departing without a word. Several inner disciples who had ill intentions regarding Lin Wang's mysterious liquid were startled by his sudden speed. By the time they thought to chase him, he was long gone. They left cursing under their breath. Some higher-level disciples couldn't openly give chase after all. This was a trading fair between inner disciples. If robbery or murder occurred and their masters found out, the consequences would be severe. As Lin Wang ran, he continued applying talisman slips to his legs. The speed boost from the talismans could stack, and with dozens applied, his speed became extreme. He soon reached the sect grounds. His greatest concern was the purple-robed man. After returning to the sect, he didn't immediately go to the miscellaneous duties area but carefully hid in an empty room. He waited until dawn when the shape-shifting pill's effects wore off, revealing his true appearance. Only then did he cautiously emerge. Fortunately, he noticed nothing unusual on his way back. Upon reaching the miscellaneous duties area, Lin Wang immediately went into close cultivation, ignoring all mundane matters. Chapter 30 for Group Training. Having obtained the manuals for key condensation up to the 9th layer, Lin Wang felt greatly reassured. He began living a reclusive life as time passed, while the entire Heng Yue Sect was filled with a tense atmosphere. All inner disciples were preparing for the year-end competition. The top 10 would receive magical treasures, pills, spirit stones, jade talismans, and more. What made them even more envious was that this time the sect leader had offered the sect's precious treasure, the twin moon rings, as the first-place prize. These twin moon rings were relics from a sect elder from 300 years ago, possessing great power and being one of the rare treasures that excelled in both offense and defense. Thus, the inner disciples were privately preparing with all their might. As for the newcomers' competition, there were only a few new inner disciples this year, and everyone believed Wang Zhu would undoubtedly become the champion among newcomers. Among the registered disciples, the mutual hostility was even more intense. For them, this competition represented a life-changing opportunity, and everyone was making final preparations in secret. All this tension had nothing to do with Lin Wang, who spent his days either cultivating or practicing the gravity technique. The day before month's end, he left the miscellaneous duties area and headed straight for the main courtyard. Having mastered the technique for concealing his spiritual energy, he could naturally hide it with a thought, creating the illusion that he hadn't yet reached the first layer of key condensation. Feeling that the miscellaneous duties area was too crowded for cultivation, he wanted to find an excuse to go down the mountain to seek a quiet place for secluded practice. Arriving at the main courtyard, he strode in and soon reached the outside of Sun Daoju's medicinal garden. He called out respectfully, "Disciple Lin Wang requests to see Master." "What do you want?" The garden gate remained closed as Sun Daoju's impatient voice came from inside, clearly showing his dislike for this disciple. Lin Wang maintained his composure, appearing outwardly respectful as he said, "Disciples' cultivation is insufficient. I feel I cannot win in tomorrow's competition and fear bringing shame to Masters, so I wish to withdraw." "At least you know your place. This time your senior Uncle Daozu's disciple Wang Shuo, young as he is, has already reached the peak of key condensation's first layer, and could break through to the second layer at any time. Even if you competed, it would be pointless. He could crush you with one finger. I heard your relatives, yet how can the gap be so large?" Lin Wang remained unperturbed, saying, "Wang Zhou has always been clever, with abundant spiritual roots. I cannot compare. Had you found any more gourds these past 6 months? Sun Dozhu asked after a brief silence. Lin Wang shook his head, showing a troubled expression. It's strange, I've been to the spring many times, but haven't seen any more gourds floating down. If there's nothing else, get lost, get lost. Just looking at you makes me angry, Sun Dozhu said coldly. Whenever he saw this disciple, he couldn't control his temper, almost wanting to strike him dead to avoid being laughed at by his peers. Master, I find it too stifling on the mountain. I wish to go down for a while and return after the new year. Would that be acceptable? Lin Wang asked respectfully, lowering his head. Go down the mountain? Absolutely not. If you hadn't mentioned it, I wouldn't have remembered in 4 years. There's the exchange meeting with the Zhuangdao sect. This time the sect leader has ordered most inner disciples to undergo 4 years of intensive training after the new year. You'll participate too, so you won't embarrass me at the exchange meeting in 4 years and ruin my reputation. Sun Dozhu flatly refused. Intensive training? Lin Wang was startled. The exchange happens every 20 years. It's been the rule for hundreds of years. Though the Zhuangdao sect and our Heng Yue sect appear friendly on the surface, we privately compete for superiority. We've lost to them in all our recent encounters over the past 100 years, which is embarrassing. That's why we're having this training. Listen carefully. If you don't show any achievement during this training and embarrass me at the exchange meeting in 4 years, I'll expel you from Heng Yue sect no matter what. Sun Dozhu explained briefly, unwilling to say more. Lin Wang sighed inwardly, realizing that cultivating outside the sect was now impossible. Seeing his master's hostile attitude, he nodded in agreement and took his leave. Returning to the miscellaneous duties area, Lin Wang pondered briefly. Since he couldn't leave to cultivate, he would have to find opportunities to practice during the training. The next day, the sect competition began with great fanfare. After some hesitation, Lin Wang chose not to watch, instead using every moment to practice breathing exercises and consolidate his progress in the second layer of qi condensation. Over the next few days, through gossip among the registered disciples, Lin Wang learned that senior brother Zhang had won first place among the inner disciples, though reportedly only because no purple-robed disciples had participated. As for Wang Shuo, he predictably became the champion among newcomers, becoming arrogant and looking down on others his age. A week later at dawn, bell tolls echoed through the Heng Yue sect, ringing 5 times, signaling all inner disciples to quickly gather at the sect's main hall. Lin Wang didn't hear it while in the dream space, until a furious Sun Dozhu kicked open the door of the miscellaneous duties area. This startled him awake, and he hurriedly put away the pearl and concealed his cultivation level before opening the dark room's door. He's os Sun Dozhu's angry face as he shouted, Lin Wang, are you deaf? Didn't you hear the bells? You wretched disciple. Every inner disciple participating in the training has arrived except you, making me lose face in front of my fellow masters. You've infuriated me. Lin Wang raised an eyebrow but remained silent. Sun Dozhu glared fiercely at Lin Wang. Knowing this wasn't the time for scolding, his disciple, the sect leader, and fellow masters were waiting, he grabbed Lin Wang without another word, stepped onto a 7-colored cloud, and swiftly rose into the air. Racing at top speed to the main hall in the central courtyard, he threw Lin Wang roughly to the ground and hissed, Lin Wang, follow me inside. If you embarrass me again, I'll strike you dead with one palm, even if the sect leader punishes me. In his final words, Sun Dozhu's eyes showed killing intent. He had grown to utterly despise this disciple and was determined to find an opportunity to expel him. Lin Wang rubbed his arm. If he hadn't already reached the second layer of qi condensation and gained a stronger body, a fall would have broken his arm. Keeping his head down, he said softly, "Disciple obeys." Sun Dozhu snorted, adjusted his clothes, and entered the hall. Lin Wang took a deep breath, suppressing his anger, and followed with a composed expression. The Heng Yue sect's main hall was the most magnificent place in the entire sect. The interior was vast, with dozens of enormous statues of the sect's ancestors lining both sides, creating a solemn atmosphere. As Lin Wang followed Sun Dozhu inside, dozens of gazes immediately focused on him. He instantly felt it difficult to breathe, and after a quick glance around, he promptly lowered his head. Chapter 35. The Back Mountain. Over 40 inner disciples stood in the main hall, wearing black, white, and red robes, though none wore purple. Each disciple maintained a respectful demeanor and serious expression. Many faces were familiar to Lin Wang, Wang Shuo, the young Miss Liu, Miss Xu, Miss Liu, Miss Xun, and other Zhang and others. Before them, a dozen or so elders sat on either side, all wearing indifferent expressions. In the center sat a man about 40, dressed in a blue robe, with an immortal bearing and eyes like lightning. He spoke calmly. "Junior brother Sun, is this your disciple?" Sun Daozhu quickly put on a smile and said, "Sect leader, senior brother, this is indeed my disciple Lin Wang. He's new to the sect and doesn't know what 5 bell tolls signify. Like master, like disciple." "Junior brother Sun, your disciple is as foolish as you were back then," mocked a red-faced elder sitting in the right position. "That's not quite right, senior brother. Junior brother Sun at least had acceptable talent back then, better than this disciple of his." Another elder chuckled. Sandoju's face alternated between red and white. He turned to glare fiercely at Lin Wang, snorted, and didn't bother to argue, instead taking an empty seat on the left. The blue-robed man frowned, gave Lin Wang a cold glance, then ignored him and spoke gravely. "As I said earlier, this training must show result. We absolutely cannot lose to the Zhuangdao sect in the exchange for years from now. Starting today, you'll enter the back mountain. Each of you will have your own cultivation spot. Focus on closed-door cultivation and improve your cultivation. The sect has provided 10,000 spirit-stealing pills for your use. You may not leave the back mountain during this period, do you understand?" All inner disciples responded in unison. The blue-robed man nodded slightly and continued, "I hope that in 4 years some among you will wear purple robes. Purple robes represent our Heng Yue Sect or disciples, far superior to inner disciples. Well, you'll understand the implications yourself. Now I'll send you to the back mountain, where someone will arrange your cultivation spots." With these words he swept his sleeve, sending out a white light that circled the hall. The man called out. The white light expanded infinitely, quickly becoming a screen of light that enveloped all the inner disciples. "Go!" At the blue-robed man's command, the light screen flickered and vanished from the hall. Lin Wang felt warm sensation through his body. When his vision cleared, he was surprised to find himself standing in a valley where the spiritual energy was much denser than outside, with the sound of flowing water in the distance. Looking around, he saw all the inner disciples wearing similar expressions of amazement as they surveyed their surroundings. The valley was barren of plants, featuring only a massive cliff face. The cliff was covered in countless honeycomb-like cave openings, some sealed with huge rocks. Suddenly Lin Wang sensed someone watching him. Turning his head, he saw Wang Zhuo looking at him with a cold smile and contemptuous expression. Just then a young man in purple robes flew out from one of the cliff caves. He swept the crowd with a cold gaze and said sternly, "Fellow junior disciples, this is our Heng Yue Sect's back mountain. Though called the back mountain, it's not actually behind Mount Heng Yue. This place was created 500 years ago by several nascent soul founders specifically for inner disciples' cultivation. The spiritual energy here far exceeds that outside. Now that you're here, seize every moment to cultivate. Don't slack off, for this senior brother will throw you out of the back mountain." Lin Wang recognized this purple-robed youth. It was second senior brother Zhang Wang, who had traded for his spirit spring water. He was said to have reached the 6th layer of qi condensation with unfathomable power. Lin Wang lowered his head slightly, well aware of Zhang Wang's scheming nature, having experienced firsthand how a few words from him had plunged Lin Wang into crisis. "I have manuals for qi condensation up to the 7th layer. When you reach the appropriate level, if you lack the manual, you may request it from me. I'll verify your level and provide it accordingly. As for your cultivation spots, you may choose any unclosed cave in this cliff. Here are spirit-stealing pills. Each bottle contains 50 pills, replenished yearly." After speaking, Zhang Wang waved his right hand, and 50 milky white bottles appeared on the ground. Inner disciples began stepping forward silently, each taking a bottle before seeking out their cultivation spot. Lin Wang took a deep breath, thinking that Zhang Wang couldn't have recognized him from that day due to the shape-shifting pill. He stepped forward and took a bottle. Jiang Wang stood nearby, watching each inner disciple pass. When he saw Lin Wang, his expression suddenly turned strange, and he asked, "What's your name? How have you not even reached the first layer of key condensation? Who's your master?" Lin Wang stopped and turned respectfully, saying, "Senior brother, I am Lin Wang, disciple of Sun Dazhu. Perhaps due to my poor talent, I haven't yet reached the first layer." Jiang Yang started, then smiled. "You're Lin Wang? I've heard of you. While talent is important, perseverance is also key to immortal cultivation. If your talent is lacking, you must work even harder." Lin Wang quickly agreed. "Well, this cliff is too high. You probably can't climb it without reaching the first layer. I'll give you a boost." Jiang Wang flicked his sleeve, creating an upward force beneath Lin Wang's feet that carried him to a cave entrance before dissipating. Lin Wang thanked Jiang Wang respectfully, then entered the cave, his expression immediately turning grim. He thought to himself that if not for that previous incident, he might have believed this second senior brother to be genuinely kind. Unfortunately, having seen his true face, Lin Wang wouldn't take this small favor to heart. The cave was small, containing only a stone bed and a handle on one wall. After studying it briefly, Lin Wang pulled the handle. With a rumbling sound, a huge stone slab slowly descended from above the cave entrance, finally sealing it with a bang. After carefully inspecting the cave and finding nothing unusual, Lin Wang was quite satisfied with it. When he'd originally sought out Sun Dazhu, he'd planned to find an excuse to leave the sect to seek a cultivation spot. Though that request was denied, this arrangement wasn't much different from what he'd wanted. There was only one drawback: the cave had no water source. Lin Wang's cultivation relied primarily on spirit-infused liquid, though he had accumulated a good amount of snow water in his storage pouch that should last some time. Moreover, he'd heard flowing water in the valley earlier. The water issue shouldn't be hard to resolve if he was careful.